The journey today is to a village which, as per the oral tradition, is a 200 years old civilization located on the steep western slope of the Cherrapunji Plateau. The village is more than an hour's walk from the starting point. Very little is known to us about this ancient civilization except that it has some of the sweetest Khasi mandarin oranges, and the trek downhill is a punishing one. We pass the well-known Daintlen Falls on our way, and further down the road going to Mausahau, we stop by the enigmatic Wai Saudong waterfall. After a short walk through an evergreen forest, we stopped to catch a glimpse of the falls. There were no visitors, and we enjoyed the standalone view from above. Carved out of the limestone and sandstone by years of heavy rain and the rushing torrents of water, Wai Saudong is apparently named after a series of 4 pools that were formed at the base of each segment of the waterfall, one on top of the other. We moved on from Wai Saudong, and after a short while drove through Lightmaid, a locality of Nongsteng village that rested on a plateau. It was a steep drop from where we stopped, and on the western horizon, one could see the Mausanram Plateau across the deep river valley. There were villages deep down below, Maufu to the right, and Umblai nearer to Nongsteng village, which was barely visible from where we stood. Despite the hazy and slightly cloudy sky, it was an awesome view. We are on our way to a village called Nongsteng. This is the Khasi Mandarin country, and there are a lot more to see in this village. Come join me as I take you across to the horizon. The next leg of our journey was on foot, a trek down the steepest hillside and back. It is not an easy walk, but the thought of the villagers walking daily up and down with loads on their back was something which challenged us as well as prepared us for the grueling return uphill climb from Nongsteng. We put the return journey on hold and focused on our destination for the time being. We never bothered to keep count of the number of steps we had to walk. It is pointless considering the fact that at some point of time, reaching our destination in one piece mattered more than anything else. This is what you see now is these polished stones, like stones on a riverbed, embedded in this huge rock. This is a regular phenomenon that you find in places all along the way, in places in South Khasi Hills, and most probably at one point of time, this place was under the ocean, because you see these stones, they resemble, you resemble the polished stones that you find on a riverbed. As I walk, this is almost 1/4 of the way to Nongsteng, and you just entered this Lau Kentang, or sacred grove. In the Khasi Hills, we have these sacred groves, and this is one of them, a conservation effort passed on from our forefathers. Indeed, the greenery here symbolizes our relationship with nature. This is indeed beautiful. Along the ancient trail of stepping stones placed against the gradient and on the contours of the slope of the land, we pass through an interesting landscape of stone pebbles embedded on rocks and resting places, or Kor Shong Thad. We moved further down the trail and stepped into a sacred grove named Mauti Kaplai, a living testimony of the indigenous religion of the forefathers who have passed on these traditional wisdom to the present generation. Although some of the indigenous practices and age-old knowledge still require to be further analyzed and deciphered, sadly, much of the tradition as we discover in Nongsteng has been ignored and lost. The sacred forest as a traditional institution where rituals are performed as and when required have been left alone and protected from any form of human intervention, because it was sacrilege to tamper with its religious sanctity. The deterrence proved beneficial and sustained the environment in the long run, and acted most importantly as a buffer against any kind of invasion by external forces. The walk through the sacred grove was a spiritual experience for me, and I'm grateful to our ancestors for the treasure that they have handed down to us. Our guide, Dariti, is tiny, but we had to keep up to her pace. The size does not matter here, neither does the gender. It all boils down to the fact that walking up and down the steps every day is an advantage. Age also matters. We have reached one of the resting places, which is a regular feature of the trails in this part of the country, the Khasi trails, along a very steep gradient. And this is where, with their loads and bamboo baskets, they put down the baskets and rest here, because the walk up is very tiring. But this is something new, because they have this cemented structure has been put in place, and if you go a bit this side, you will see that the old structure is still in place, but the cement has overtaken this ancient resting place, or what we call in the local language, Mao Shong That. There are a total of 3 resting places along the way, namely Kor Shong That Mau Yang Joj, Kor Shong That Mau Kho Ro, and Kor Shong That Mau Shong That Kai. Nongsteng is one of the greenest villages, with trees lined all along the way
and providing shade from the sun. The bay leaf trees on both sides of the path emit a fragrance that pours out into the cool breeze, and we catch the whiff of the sweet scented leaves as we pass by. We walked on to discover some more of nature's wealth that grows abundantly in Nongsteng and are a major source of livelihood for the farmers of the village. Wild pepper, known for its medicinal properties, is a major crop besides the broom grass. But a crop for the last 200 years which has sustained the village is the homegrown Khasi Mandarin orange, which dominates the hill slopes of Nongsteng and its localities Pat Ramda and Keng Shempet.
So along the way, about more than halfway to Nongsteng village, we happened to come across this orange grove of Khasi mandarins, and the fruits that have fallen on the ground, we picked them up and tried to sample a few, whether they're sweet or not. In fact, these oranges have been here for generations, and Nongsteng is famous for the Khasi mandarin. Apparently, the Khasi mandarin from this village, the Khasi mandarin from this village is one of the sweetest.
The scene as we enter the avenue of oranges is surreal, and our 180 degrees view of the horizon is of nothing but trees laden with the Khasi Mandarin orange.
I've just walked into this beautiful place and it's amazing. This is what you call an orange paradise. This is really surreal to be surrounded with so many oranges. You can smell the oranges. This is truly the Khasi Mandarin country.
The steps never ending as we trudge on the footpath downhill and stop by the courtyard to socialize with some of the residents, old and young. There are two schools that cater to the education of the younger generation of the 80-odd households of Nongsteng village. One of them is the government lower primary school and the other is the Ram Krishna Mission lower primary and upper primary school. As per the information given by the headman of the village, all the young boys and girls are enrolled in the schools. However, in remote villages like Nongsteng, the value of education, although considered important, cannot sustain the interest of the youth as a means to improve their economic status, as they have to continue the tradition of the parents of laboring in the fields to earn their livelihood. Moreover, the curriculum lacks innovation and is a fundamental and complete departure from the ingenious economic activities and their way of life. Therefore, according to some of the elders, there is an urgent need to teach the younger generation with skills that will match their passion as well as support them in their quest for a better life. Before we enter into another sacred grove, we stumbled upon a gravesite of the Rapthap clan. What we discovered here was an interesting feature of a bit of the history and social life of the inhabitants.
These are maushing or the ossuaries, where the members of the indigenous religion interred the bones of the dead after the cremation. So we have 1 here, 2 here, 3, 4, 5. So when a member of a family dies, what happens is they bury or they inter the bones of the dead in their own land. So what we see here is a transition. This family, the forefathers, probably converted from the Khasi indigenous religion to Christianity. And you have here this monument with the cross. This symbolizes that the person who was buried here was a Christian. So in Nongsteng, the church does not have a cemetery. What happens here is some member of the family dies, they bury the person, they bury the dead in the property of the family.
About 70% of the villagers have converted from their indigenous religion, resulting in the loss of many traditional practices and culture. On further inquiry as to the cause of this cultural loss amongst the villagers, we found that it was due to neglect and apathy through the years. The sacred groves, fortunately, are the last bastions of the indigenous culture in Nongsteng. These repositories of our heritage and biodiversity are secure and safe as long as violating their sanctity is considered a taboo.
Kumaya tu kiru temen hi kasno jongi ngila don kuma sau sanli kisno ki bangi pelong yang kasno jongi ti kumaju long hi kiru handai shwa bikin shong ya kan kasno kida sat kida khaina ni kida pet da yin tu kan ti kumalong menshwa ti keleng kila don kuma sau snong san snong tu ti ka bakhat duduk pada ka ta ka jingsha ka jingkhan jongki ka kup akan ka haune ulum jong ka snong steng ti na duk kata kapor pada ki ni salong kumni ko mailong ka roy ka snong ka thau te re ban ong ya kata ka jinglong jingseng ya kane ka snong im datip ya ka tarik ya ni usnem uba iyo kan te re la kumno la sukhen antat la kumki khan ruspa ka jingpe ke jonga te ya kini ki pausnem pangat ai kai te kalong ba kumba kat kum ka kendon mo na po ka asasi long ba ki khena ki bana dun rusnem adu kha sausnem ki ya ka jing hikai ki na dong sedong te kamut hadu kitu ki kartahi ki kham logi kham ya be te po skol re nang lan nang tu pat de ti namar kasyong ogi kimi pa kham tambah snong jongi kam de snong ka barus pa ni ka bayo pakot te teng ki la arab kam hi ngasem la ni ki arab kamai ha hi ngasem kum baju long hi te dangi pang sitom te ngihap kit ba hi kat kum bajing sitom jong bureo dan teng baju sitom bum tu te ni sukit bai suki te teng tu ba or ki ba hap nim ta pa de mla ban kit suki hap susna ding ni ki kenja ki eng khot ki rasan de ki tu rasan bisu isu yara itu lain sangut tu ti kelong tai ki katum jing jaka sumar ti kebanan kong ti ki ba mala teng ya be ne po mo sau kan ne po ti ki ba la tu pat de ti gila syong ka jing yo jing khot jing beri ki dan ki bala silong deng bala sia sora kat kum jing yo jing khot jeki.
Nongsteng sits on a steep gradient. The houses are built on both sides of the footpath, which is at almost 75 degrees angle in some places. It seems as if the village is built on a series of terraces like small plots where the cottages stand. Some of us were shaking in the knees after the long walk downhill. It had been a challenging trek and we still needed to move further down to the Umyam river at the base of the valley. This is not a trek for the uninitiated or the faint-hearted. We still had the torturous return climb back home to worry about. For now, it was another 30 minutes of knee-shaking exercise down the trail. On the way, we passed by some of the traditional beekeepers' man-made hives inside hollowed tree trunks. Honey is an important source of cash, and apparently the orange-based honey is top quality here. I witnessed for the first time the art of growing wild pepper on a pile of rocks. It seems that this age-old practice of cultivating the wild pepper plant originated in Nongsteng. Traditional methods and techniques like these are invaluable to the community as they have been tried and tested and are an important aspect of the village's horticultural practice. The trail was an ancient one passing through a rainforest. We finally reached the river Umnyam after some 30 minutes from the village. The Echra suspension footbridge, built 8 years ago, was the only safe passage over the river if anyone wanted to cross to the other side. The condition of the iron cables that support the structure were rusty, and parts of the side rails had been damaged. Almost 100 meters in length, it was an impressive looking bridge, but its lifespan was limited due to the interplay of heat and high humidity that causes the rusting and slow decay of the iron bridge. The river Umyam is with less water at this time of the year, with rocks and boulders exposed. This river, which originates in the highlands, is still relatively unpolluted. It will be dammed in a few years' time, some distance away, upstream of Nongsteng. The construction work of a hydroelectric power plant by the Northeastern Electric Power Corporation (NEPCO) is continuing near the village Maufu. There is an existing water reservoir dam further upstream in the upper reaches of the river in Mauflang. From the suspension footbridge, we went back on a trail uphill to the river Wa Mausau, which joined the river Wa Umyam from Nongsteng. This was the most anticipated and exciting leg of our journey, as we were in for a pleasant surprise. Something that we have travelled this far to catch a glimpse of.
So we are about to reach our destination. This is one of the reasons that we came to Nongsteng. This is one of the last few bridges in the western part of the Khasi Hills, the western Cherrapunji Plateau. This is the Jinking Wa Mausau. This is the route bridge that has been eluding us for many years now. It's a beautiful bridge, and it has two parts, beautiful, as old as 200 years. Come take a walk with me. This is a very old, ancient. If you look at the roots, the color of the roots, moss-ridden. It's amazing how this has lasted for so many years now.
Hagen yade ne jiking jadi lakum bacu yo jeng tip lengkot na temen mo la kumnom nori malan sis pak khandai po prasnem kane jiking jadi kadon hadu mentah tina kaliang jong ngau saudar kat ini tang ba sinong hakini ke san sinong lewan jengo lewan pej mentah ngamut ban pen bha ban pen biang pen imbiang ni jiking jadi tidon hakini ke snem gi bladam long katua pas dang mendu pi nabu tau thiet thì mình kan ning lewan khongon ni lewan pej ban bha no kan khna bagin idon hadu ala tli ki ding jiri tang kan ka we de ka la temen tam lo ka jiri kan thì kwa baya kan ni ka wa barok la jaka pet im ki jing jiri kan thì ban dia ka doru hadu ha ka sinong ru ngilabu de ka phan bagim sa ban lek pom lek o thit ni ban le kino ban pasniu kan jing jiri thì long kan ne cái jing jiri na du mình đai Kalau ai kejeng mentoi yo pak bak jong ka than nei tang ka sinong Nongsteng balet samo pu ki balet chatit dieng ki balet sanong silun ki ya lang ba na kan jengking jeri balong ba kini ki jengking sainar in sinat kan usi pau ka sasnem lat kot adu hap repair kan ni jengking jeri mental jandap aspak snem nim dot kamban repair.
The Jinking Jri Wa Mau Sao is 30 meters long. It has served the community of Nongsteng for 200 years, and it is as deep-rooted as the civilization of these hills and valleys. Unlike the iron bridge, this living organism and structure continues to survive, and it will serve the people as long as it is maintained and looked after by the generations to come. While some aspects of the indigenous knowledge and culture has been lost in Nongsteng due to neglect and indifference, this root bridge is a surviving entity and symbol of the resilience of a culture, of a people who braved the odds and who continue to thrive in the face of adversity. It is the story of a civilization that tamed this inhospitable terrain and made it their home from time immemorial. On our way back, we make a slight detour to another bridge over the river Wa Mau Sao. This Ficus bridge is almost destroyed, but there was some hope because the community is restoring it back to its organic self.
Well, we just happened to pass by this second root bridge, but what you see here is something which has been destroyed, but again revived. You see these iron cables. The villagers, what they've done is they've stretched these roots of the Ficus elastica, stretched this all the way to the other end to rebuild this bridge. This is indeed a really good effort because they have realized that iron bridges don't last for more than 15 years, but root bridges, they last a lifetime.
The infant root tendrils were stretched out across the bridge along the iron cables. In some 10 years' time, these thin threads will grow into thick root-like stems, which will eventually anchor and support the whole structure. One thing that stands out, which we observed in our journey, is the use of native ingenuity in all of man's activities in Nongsteng. When the forefathers have, with limited technology, applied their minds and managed to claim the land and the rivers, it only proves that man can find a solution no matter how big the problem is. Day-to-day life is a struggle in Nongsteng, especially for the sick and ailing. Medical care is still a major problem as hospitals and dispensaries are some distance away. If one has to make an estimation on the age of a village, one can get valuable information through observing the pattern of cultivation. A well-established horticulture-based civilization indicates that the indigenous farming, including the methods and techniques, have been handed down from many generations. Nongsteng is as old, if not older, than its Khasi mandarin trees, its turmeric, its wild pepper and bay leaf trees.
Well, today was a learning experience. There are three things that you get to learn from this trip to Nongsteng. One is the environment. The people here love the environment. They live with the environment. Another is the energy of the people here. Walking up and down these slopes is not an easy task and you need lots of energy. And the third is the experience. This has been a memorable experience. The sun is about to set and we are off to go back home until we meet again in another village, Kublai.